Good day and welcome to another exciting episode of Insider's View. I'm your host, Melissa Handrahan. Today we have a very special guest. We're getting up close and personal with Mr. Jagmeet Singh, who's the first turban-wearing Sikh ever elected in the Ontario legislature. So he's the Member of Provincial Parliament for the riding of Bramley Gore Malton. It's a pleasure to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here as well.
Well, we're into your second term now
That's right.
as an MPP. We want to get into some details as to what it's like for you and get to know you a little bit better, because
Sure.
I know most of my viewers have heard of you, but they don't really know your background per se. So
Okay.
let's start with there.
Sure. So I guess when people talk about background, I guess where I grew up is kind of a part of the story. So I was born in Scarborough. I actually lived in Punjab for a year when I was very little. So the first language I ever learned was Punjabi, actually. After that, I came back. My father got into medical school in Newfoundland. So I lived in Newfoundland for a number of years. So people don't know too much about that. We were there for about 6 years. And after Newfoundland, my parents were worried that I could only speak Punjabi, so we stopped speaking Punjabi at home, and then I only spoke English. So I actually forgot a lot of the Punjabi. I grew up most of my childhood in Windsor, and in Windsor you can imagine being brown skin, having a name like Jagmeet, and being a boy with long hair resulted in a lot of bullying and racism in a city like Windsor. Back then there wasn't very much diversity. So that kind of informed a lot of who I am and made me very confident in myself. I thought that people are going to make fun of me and stare at me, but I can choose how I respond to that. So I tried to be very confident in myself and stand up to that with a lot of strength and confidence and kind of inner awareness. So I tried that, and it kind of developed in me a sense of self. And afterwards, I went to University of Western Ontario for my science degree, so I did a BSc there. I also minored in philosophy and sociology, but sciences were my main studies. And then I got into law school, and I went to law school at Osgoode Hall Law School. And afterwards, practiced for about 6 years, worked at one of the largest criminal defense firms, had an amazing run as a career in law, and I really enjoyed it, and then got into politics.
Well, now that you're in politics, you've developed this cult-like following. You've got young people that are idolizing you. You've been called a fashionista. We've seen posters of you at Yorkdale Shopping Centre. So how is all this stardom alongside the politics taking a toll on you? What's your life like?
Well, it's definitely a different lifestyle. So as a lawyer, I mean, I wasn't in the public eye to nearly the same degree. I had somewhat of a profile. I was known for certain human rights issues. So I did have a profile, but nothing nearly to the extent that it is now. In fact, I was really honored and amazed that since I've been traveling after being elected, I was in Australia and in Hong Kong and different places around the world, and people would come up to me and know who I am, particularly Sikh folks would know who I am across the world. So the fact that across the world people know me is just something that blows me away. And I still don't believe it. Sometimes I pinch myself. I couldn't imagine as a young kid growing up in Windsor where no one really gave me a lot of positive attention in terms of the mainstream community, to be elected and to be received with such positivity and such warmth. It's something that still shocks and surprises me in a really positive way and a really happy way, but I still don't believe it sometimes.
Well, a lot of people say that it's actually your personality that won the election. The NDP, correct me if I'm wrong, have never won in the Peel region before. So, you as a person have really developed a following for the National Democratic Party. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because it's more about you. Even your leader, Andrea Howarth, has you right behind her in the legislature. So you're really breaking glass ceilings everywhere. So talk a little bit about you, what role specifically you play in the development of your party.
Sure thing. I have to say, Melissa, you've done your research. You know all sorts of amazing things. That's so cool. You're right. Even the party acknowledges that in this riding, you're absolutely right. This is the first time the NDP has ever won in the history of Canada, whether provincially or federally, in this not just the city, but in the entire region of Peel. So you're absolutely right. And it was a big breakthrough for us, and it was largely based on that personal kind of connection I had with the community, which is such a great honor, and I'm still humbled by that. But you're right. So what we did is we tried to do campaigning and politics in a different way. We tried to connect with people in a unique way. We knew that the party didn't have even 10% of the vote. They had approximately 6 to 7% of the vote historically, maybe 4,000 to 5,000 votes. And to win, you need somewhere around, well into the 16,000, 17,000 range to win. So we had a really uphill battle to go ahead with. So it took a lot of creative campaigning. It took a lot of connecting with people, really building on the personal brand. We had an amazing team that did a lot of our kind of visioning and our messaging and our branding. We had some really cool videos that connected with people. I was lucky to have some friends who are very popular on YouTube who helped provide me with a platform so that I could connect with more folks. So you're right, and youth is one of the biggest and most important aspects of our team, the fact that we have such an amazing youth engagement. Normally in politics, people talk about youth apathy, that young people aren't engaged. In our situation, it was the other way around. We had so much engagement from the youth.
Right. Now, let's talk a bit about federal and provincial politics, because
Sure.
you did run federally once.
That's right.
That was the beginning of your political career, and you came a very, very close second.
That's right.
So the rumors have it that maybe you might be taking another federal run. Is that possible?
Yeah, so I mean, there's no secret that I ran initially federally. I came within 500 votes, less than 1 percentage point difference between myself and the winner. So it was very, very narrow in terms of the margin. And it's an area that I've been interested in. I speak fluent French, so it's an area where I could use my French more often. Yeah. It's a place where there are certain international issues that I really am interested in individually. It's something that, as a human rights activist, as a lawyer who cares about those issues, it's something where I'm quite interested in. But the reality is that if you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have said 100%, maybe even 2 years ago, I would have said 100% I'm going federal as soon as the chance is there. People knew that before that was my goal. I've actually really enjoyed being in provincial politics, though. It's something that connects to people in a more tangible way. Your day-to-day life is mostly impacted by either municipal or provincial issues, and federal issues don't really have that direct impact on your life. So that's something that's weighing on my mind, and I really am concerned about the public, what they want and what their feelings are. But it's something that I'm very interested in. I've always been interested in, and I would love to have the opportunity to serve the community at that level. It would be a great honor.
So October 2015?
Yeah, so I guess we'll see. I mean, I haven't made a formal decision, but it's something I'm definitely interested in. I would love to do it. It would be a great honor for me. I think I have the skills to do a good job, but I have to consult with a lot of people before I make the decision.
Very fair. Now we're going to talk a little bit more with Mr. Jagmeet Singh after this break, and we're going to find out a little bit more what his day-to-day activities are in the provincial politics. Stay with us. We're back in conversation with MPP Jagmeet Singh. So provincial politics, we want to talk a little bit about what critic roles you have, because I think you play a very, very important, you're just a very important caucus member for the NDP.
Yeah, I mean, it's a recent, a great honor. So I started off as justice critic. It's something that I have a lot of experience in as a lawyer. I've done a lot of work with the justice system, so I kind of, that was a natural fit for me. In addition to the justice critic portfolio, I also am the critic for the consumer and government and consumer services. So that ties in a lot of the issues that affect us here in Brampton, like auto insurance falls into the consumer services portfolio. So that's why I have that portfolio as well. And most recently, it's really a great honor. I've been appointed the deputy house leader for the NDP. So that's a higher leadership position in the party. It reflects the fact that I have a great relationship with the entire caucus and the leader, and I'm really honored that when I want something done, I feel like I have a good open communication with all the people that I need to have to get things done. So it's a great honor, and it's a great appointment. So
well, it's obvious that your working relationship with Ms. Horwath is amazing. So let's talk about the inside scoop.
Sure.
What are your caucus meetings like, and what issues are your claim to fame right now that you've been pushing through from the inside?
Well, I guess a number of issues. We've started off with, one of my objectives was, what's the major issue that hurts and impacts people the most in my riding? And the number one issue, without any doubt, was auto insurance. So right off the bat, I really pushed to say, listen, this issue is so big, it's a huge issue, and we really need to work on it. Now, the NDP didn't have a big portfolio with respect to auto insurance. It wasn't on their radar. In fact, in terms of a lot of the progressive circles, auto insurance seems to be too pro-car. So a lot of folks that were in the NDP didn't want to push an agenda that would somehow seem to be encouraging driving cars. They wanted to move towards more public transit. And I had to sit down with all of the members of caucus of the NDP and say, listen, we look at this as a car issue. You have to look at it as a social justice issue. People living in the suburbs don't have access to public transportation. They need a car to get around. And so I really pushed that, and I got, the result was, out of all the caucus members, you know, there were 17 of us, each of us have different issues. I asked for the auto insurance to be one of our main platforms in terms of the budget and in terms of our demands with the government during the minority government. And it was accepted by the leadership, and everyone said, sure, we'll go ahead with it, which is a really big thing. That was a lot of work behind the scenes we had to do to make sure that auto insurance got that importance. And then we saw it being one of our main pieces during the election, during the pre-budget, and during the past negotiations. So that was a big issue. And I did a lot of work around human rights, making sure that our party had a strong human rights position. And specifically with the Sikh community, I worked on accommodation. So we wanted to make sure that we had the party on side with religious accommodations for all people, and make sure that that was something that we could stand up and say is a party policy, and we got that passed at a convention. So that was another really big achievement.
So going back to auto insurance, because that's a hot topic in Brampton,
Yeah.
a lot of people are saying that it's still the highest rates across the country. So how has your legislation come through for Bramptonians?
Sure. So I guess first off, before I kind of got onto the scene, the issue wasn't even something that was talked about in terms of politics. People talked about it between each other, but it was never really discussed in Queen's Park. It wasn't something that had any sort of highlight, any sort of attention. Right when I got elected, for the first 2 years, all I did was really push the auto insurance file. And we got it to the point that it became one of the major issues in the province. We had the government talking about it, our party was obviously talking about it. We were really pushing the agenda. We passed a commitment in Parliament, a resolution that said that we needed to have a 15% reduction. That was a resolution I put forward on behalf of the New Democratic Party. And what happened was the government accepted it. So that was a big victory for us, that they finally acknowledged the rates are too high, we need to see reduction. On top of that, we got a budget request. We said we need to see a 50% reduction in the budget. They agreed, the government, the Liberals agreed to that as well. Now, in terms of the implementation, we haven't seen the reductions that we should have seen. And that's something that I'm going to continue to hold the government to account and say, listen, you promised to do this, but you haven't really delivered. There are some rates that have gone down, but by and large, people tell me the rates haven't really gone down enough. So it's something I'm going to continue to fight for. My main concern is that, listen, as an opposition member, my job is to push the agenda, to push the issues. And it's on the Liberal, or the government of the time, right now, the Liberal government, to make those changes, to implement the changes. So I can continue pushing, and we really need to make sure we put pressure on the government to actually follow through on that.
Okay. Another legislation is the Sikh Heritage Month,
Yes.
which was a big accomplishment for you. I'm just curious because recently I think that there was a visa that was denied for you going to India. Do you think that there's any correlation between the two?
Well, I know that officially, in fairness, the government has said that we don't have any, we're not releasing our reason for denying the visa. So I've formally requested a reason, and they formally said, we're not providing a reason, it's our right to deny anyone. But informally, my understanding from my discussions with the folks that actually denied me the visa was that they wanted me to stop talking so much about human rights in India. And the issues that I raised consistently when it comes to India in general was the mistreatment of minority groups, including the Christians in India, Muslims in India, and Sikhs in India, and particularly women in India. And so I've talked about these 4 issues and really criticized the government, saying that it's not something that's happening by chance. It's something that's actually concerted. It's an effort made by the government to actually subjugate these people. If you look at the government policies, the fact that the military uses rape so frequently across India to subdue different populations, that obviously sets a tone for the populace then to do those type of activities. So I've been very critical about that, and the government has suggested that my stance on these issues on 1984, on talking about human rights and talking about fairness, is something that makes them look bad, and they wanted me to stop doing that. And I said, listen, I'm going to continue to talk about human rights. I talk about it when it comes to China, when it comes to Sri Lanka, even here in Canada when there's violations against Aboriginals or Native people. I talk about that. It's something that I believe in. So I said, I'm not going to stop doing it, and that's why I got denied.
As Canada now moves closer to India in trade relations and moving towards free trade and better relationships, do you find yourself in a personal conflict here? Because on one hand, I think you're a very good champion for human rights, but on the other hand, there's a lot of hindrances that can occur because, our relationship is very important. So do you feel like you're caught in between two worlds? Well,
I mean, it's an interesting position that I'm in, because if I actually raise this issue that in terms of my, belief in the the success and the progress of the South Asian subcontinent, I point to my family history. My great-grandfather was a freedom fighter that fought with the British, and he's taught in schools. There's a statue of him in a major city talking about how he fought and gave his life for the independence of the community of that area. My oldest uncle, my Tayaji, that's now passed away, he died fighting for the protection of India in 1972 in the Indo-Pak War. And then my current oldest living uncle, Tayaji, he's a major, like a highest ranked general in the Indian Army who's retired. So my family's given a lot, and my position is that talking about human rights, being critical about mistakes made by a government will only improve the community, will improve the situation. It'll actually prevent human rights violations in the future. So it's in the interest of the country to actually discuss those things. So I think I'm doing it I believe that talking about these issues is actually going to improve a country. When we criticize Canada for its treatment of Aboriginals or Native, it's not to say that we hate Canada. We're to say that we want it to improve, to do better things. So that's my perspective on it.
Okay, well, we've got lots more to talk about with MPP Jagmeet Singh. We're going to find out what he thinks about the opposition parties when we return. Welcome back. We're in conversation with Jagmeet Singh, the MPP for Bramley Gore Malton. Now, will your riding change in the next election, I believe, with the new boundaries?
Yeah, it will. It's a good question. The riding right now, as it stands, is one of the largest in Canada. It's one of the top 5 largest. A riding should be about 100,000 people is roughly what you want a riding to be. Our riding is double that. It's about 200,000. So there's been a great increase in population, a great boom here in terms of people coming to live in the community. So we need to make it a bit more fair in terms of representation. If it's 200,000 and they're only getting one elected official, it's a bit unfair for the community. So it's going to be broken up. Federally, it's already been done. So Bramley, Gore, Malton, those 3 communities have now been separated out. So the Gore community has been made into Brampton East, and the Malton community is being combined with the other another Mississauga portion. So there's a Mississauga riding, and then the Bramley portion will be a part of Brampton Centre. So it's being broken up, and it'll make the riding a bit closer to the average. It'll be about 140,000, so a little bit closer to the 100,000 mark. So that'll happen federally now, and normally what happens is in the next provincial election, the changes will take place.
Okay, and which riding would you be contesting in then?
So it would be Brampton East is where I received most of my support. It's an area that I have the strongest ties. Even provincially, that's the area that makes me win, basically. That's the area that I get the greatest amount of support, so that would be the community that I continue to serve.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the other parties.
Sure.
Now, let's start with the Progressive Conservatives. They're
Sure.
in the middle of a very different kind of leadership race.
That's right.
In the ideal world for the NDP, who do you think would be the best option for the next election?
Well, normally speaking, if you really want to get into electoral success, it's good to contrast yourself. So we have a leader who's a woman, who's a very progressive, strong leader, and to contrast that, having a male leader would be a good contrast for us. So there's Patrick Brown, and there's, I think, only one other woman that's left now, I think, in terms of the race. So yes. Perhaps, Patrick Brown would probably be the better, just
contender.
Yeah, on the face of it, just as a contrast, I think that would be good.
Yes. Okay. Now let's put on your critic role for the majority Liberal government. That was quite unexpected, but nonetheless, we have Kathleen Wynne with the majority government.
Right.
And just interested to get your perspective on what you would do different. I mean, she's plagued by a lot of scandals and controversies,
right.
And there's even a criminal investigation going. Or 2.
Yeah.
So tell me what you think your party, if they were in power, what they would do different.
Well, one of the big things is, and this came up a lot in the election, 2 factors. One is transparency and accountability. We really believe that we need to push that. That's something that we're seeing more and more people are losing their faith in politics. They don't trust politicians. They don't trust the government. And scandals and the lack of transparency really makes people turned off from politics, makes them less likely to go out and vote. So we really need to see, and this is something we're really pushing for as New Democrats, is we want to see people feel that they could trust the government. And a lot of that is first being transparent. Right. And Kathleen Wynne initially said that she would be transparent and accountable, but then we saw the results of it. One major example is there's a gas plant report. And widely, not just the opposition parties, but even media looked at that report, and very basic things were avoided by the government. They didn't want to talk about the fact that they said, emails were deleted, and the reasoning for that was bad training. When the fact was, we heard evidence from people saying we were instructed to delete emails. So even that level of transparency is not there. The other area that we would do differently as New Democrats is the party, the platform that was suggested, the budget that was suggested by the Liberals was said to be very progressive. We said no, it's actually has a lot of hidden cuts, and it's actually an austerity budget. The reality is now coming forward that it is actually about a lot of cuts. There's been cuts to nursing, cuts to medical care, there's been cuts to public services, the things that we all rely upon, our families rely upon. There's been significant cuts, and these are the things that we knew about. So our position would be we don't need to be cutting public services. There's ways we can find more efficiencies, but we shouldn't be cutting the things that our families depend upon.
In the Liberal caucus, who are some of the members or ministers that you have a really good working relationship with?
I actually have a good relationship with a lot of them. I really believe in the idea of, there's a lot of times where we have to be, we have to hold parties to account, but a lot of times we just need to connect as humans. Yep. So I really believe in that, and I have a kind of a very friendly, joking relationship with the Minister of Finance. Okay. Mr. Sousa and he jokes around with me a lot. He's a great guy. There's the Minister of Culture and Sports. He's a wonderful guy. He's younger and closer in age to me, so we get along quite well. I have a lot of respect for Helena Jasic. She's now a minister as well. And she was on a committee with me, and I thought she was a very principled person, and I still believe so. So yeah, there's a number of people that I have good relationships with.
How about members on the Conservative side?
Yeah, we have a good relationship. We're in the same boat in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I'm part of the House team, so as a House team, we meet with the House leaders. So the House leader for the Conservatives is a member named Mr. Clark, and we have a great relationship. We joke a lot. I actually used to have a great time talking with Mr. Cleese, who was a member from Newmarket. Mm-hmm. He got a lot of attention for being one of the champions behind holding the government to account for the Orange scandal. Yes. So he's now retired and no longer represents Newmarket. He didn't run in the last election, but he's another person that I have a good relationship with as well. Okay,
interesting. And in your own caucus, who would you say is like your buddy with?
You know what? There's one member. I'm friends with everybody. We're all great friends. I actually hang out a lot with Taras Nadashak. He's the MPP from Essex. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Windsor, so sometimes I go back to visit friends. And Taras lives there, so I actually stay with him. I don't stay in a hotel, I stay at his house. Mm-hmm. We hang out, we go boating. He's got a lovely family. His wife is amazing, and he's got 2 kids that are great. So we have a great relationship that way. We hang out a lot.
Do you think that politics is going to be your career moving forward?
You know what? I never wanted to get into politics, actually. That was never my, some people say that, okay, down the road I'd like to get into politics. It wasn't something that I thought of as a career. Mm-hmm. I maybe jokingly once in life would have mentioned when I'm really old I'll get into politics or something like that, yeah. Where I got into politics at a younger age than that. It's not something that I think will be my career. I mean, I'm really honored to be doing this. It's an amazing role. I think about the fact that we have 13 million people in the province of Ontario, and there's only 107 members of provincial parliament. So it's a great honor. Like, I'm blown away by that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know if it's something I want to do as a career forever. I mean, I really enjoy law. I was really good at it. It's something that I find really interesting. I like the idea of starting up businesses, so that's something I'm interested in doing, particularly in our community in Brampton. We need more businesses to get people jobs. So there's a lot of things that I'm interested in doing. I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future, though.
In the Punjabi community, politics is very important.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's in our blood, and sure. That's what we talk about day in and day out.
Absolutely.
For all the young people that have been following you, and because you're such a trendsetter in a different party, not the traditional Liberal or Conservative party, what's the best advice that you can give and continue to give in terms of helping young people and directing them in careers in politics?
Well, I guess my career is built on really being bold. I mean, like you said, I'm not a part of one of the traditional parties. People normally think of either going Conservative, Liberal. People don't really think of going, New Democratic. It's also not a party that you would think, I'm a lawyer, I've had a lot of experience in law, I had my own practice. Normally people think that if you're, a professional, that it's not the party, it's more of a party of, working people. But I mean, it's a party for everyone, I think. And that's something that being bold and making decisions that don't normally fit the mold is something that sets you apart. I always say that confidence should come internally. If I base my confidence on, let's say I think that people think I'm stylish, but if I base my confidence on being stylish and someone comes around that's more stylish than me, then my confidence is is weakened. But if my confidence comes from something internal, who I am as a person, where I've come from, my roots, my culture, those are things that are unchangeable. Those are things that are always going to be with me. And that sense of confidence will really help you move forward. So I really try to encourage that, instilling in yourself that internal confidence that doesn't get impacted by what's going on around you, that gives you that sense of who you are, because that'll never change, right? That understanding of who you are. You might grow as a person, but appreciating who you are will get you that confidence to succeed.
Spoken as a true wise man. Mr. Singh, we could probably talk with you all day, but we've run out of time, so it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we hope that you'll return again.
Thank you. I would love to. It's been a great interview. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us, all of our viewers, for Insider's View. Stay tuned. Many more episodes on the way. I'm Melissa Handrahan. Bye for now.